The chamber was designed to humble. High Chancellor Zareth had seen to that personally, 600 years ago, when the Galactic Council first convened. He had ordered the ceiling raised until even the tallest species would feel the weight of the void above them. Holographic stars drifted across that ceiling now, cold and indifferent, and the voices of 41 civilizations murmured in overlapping frequencies across the semicircular tiers. Commander Mara Ellison stood in the speaking circle at the center of it all and did not look up. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, boots planted shoulder-width apart on the pale stone floor. She was not especially tall by human standards. She had a face that had spent too many seasons under alien suns, weathered, sharp at the edges, calm in the way that things become calm only after they have survived catastrophe more than once. A white scar traced a diagonal from her left jaw to her collarbone, a souvenir from the siege of Kethara that she never bothered to have removed. Zareth regarded her from his elevated seat at the apex of the chamber. He was ancient by any measure, his kind lived long, and he had filled those centuries with the particular skill of making power feel inevitable. His carapace was the color of deep water, and his 4 compound eyes caught the drifting starlight in amber fragments. "Commander Ellison," he said, his voice shaped by a translator implant into something that resonated in the human chest. "The Council recognizes your species' petition for full military alliance status. We have reviewed your written submissions." He paused. That pause was another tool. He let it stretch until the murmuring in the tiers faded to nothing. "We find them insufficient." A ripple moved through the chamber. Delegates shifted. Somewhere in the upper tiers, a species whose name translated roughly as the chorus of unending agreement chittered in 3-part harmony that meant disappointment. Mara did not move. "Insufficient," she repeated. Not a question. Not an argument. Just the word, placed carefully between them like a stone on a table. "Your species has been space-capable for fewer than 3 centuries, Zareth continued, folding 2 of his 4 hands in a gesture that signified patient condescension. "You have fought conflicts, yes. You have won several of them. But full alliance status requires demonstrated command authority, not over soldiers, Commander, but over the autonomous war-class units your species has, reportedly, managed to establish bonds with. The Velcon-bonded units. The Osir Siegewalkers. The Drathpaks." He let another pause breathe. "No species has ever commanded all 3 simultaneously. We require proof." "You require proof," Mara said, "that one human can lead what 41 other species could not." "We require proof," Zareth said carefully, "that the claim is not merely human enthusiasm mistaken for capability." Another ripple. This one had a sharper edge. Mara turned her head slightly toward her adjutant, who stood at the edge of the speaking circle with a datapad and the expression of someone doing complex arithmetic in their head. She said nothing to him. He gave a small nod. She turned back to Zareth. "How large is the parade ground behind this facility?" Zareth blinked, all 4 eyes, sequentially, which in his species indicated genuine surprise. "I beg your pardon?" "The flat ground to the north of the chamber complex. I need to know the dimensions." There was a pause of a different quality now, confused, rather than deliberate. The keeper of the hall, a small figure in layered robes who seemed to exist primarily to answer questions no one thought to ask, cleared their throat. "Approximately 400 meters by 300 meters, Commander." "That's enough." She looked up at Zareth. "I'll need the session adjourned for 20 minutes. Then I'd ask the Council to step outside." The murmuring came back, louder. Zareth studied her for a long moment. He had not survived 6 centuries of interspecies politics by being incautious. But he had also not survived them by refusing the interesting moments. 20 minutes, he said. The northern parade ground was a wide, flat expanse of pale stone that the Council used for ceremonial formations and, occasionally, the arrival of delegations too large to dock inside. The afternoon sky above Conclave Station was the particular gray-violet of a gas giant's upper atmosphere. They were in permanent orbital equinox, and the light came from all directions at once, shadowless and even. The delegates filed out through the great doors in their dozens, arranging themselves on the elevated observation platform that overlooked the ground. Zareth took his place at the center railing. He had brought a security detail, as had most of the delegates. Old habits. The parade ground was empty. Mara Ellison walked out onto the stone alone. She had removed her dress uniform jacket. Beneath it she wore a simple gray base layer, and in her right hand she carried nothing but a small cylinder, dark metal, unadorned, about the length of her forearm. She walked to the center of the ground and stopped. Zareth leaned forward against the railing. "Commander," he called down, "the ground is empty." "It is," she agreed. She raised the cylinder to her lips. She whistled. It was not a loud sound. It was not a complicated one. It was 3 notes, low, middle, low, in a specific rhythm that meant, in the language she had spent 7 years learning to speak in frequencies rather than words, form up. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the ground shook. They came from the loading bays on the eastern side, the great double doors blew open from the inside, and the Velcon came through first, because they always came first. They were 6 meters at the shoulder, built like something that evolution had designed specifically to make other things feel afraid. Their hides were plates of natural chitin over corded muscle, their heads low and broad, their 6 limbs moving in a gait that somehow managed to be both elegant and devastating. They came in formation without being told, 3 columns, precise spacing, heads level. 40 of them. The delegates on the platform made sounds in 17 different languages that all meant the same thing. The Osser came next, from the northern loading gate, the siege walkers, as the council called them, though the Osser did not think of themselves as siege weapons. They were 80 tons each of armored biology, with manipulator limbs folded against their bodies and optical clusters that could track targets across 4 kilometers of open ground. They moved more slowly than the Velcon, but the tremors from their footfalls arrived at the platform before they did. 60 of them. Zareth gripped the railing. The Drath came last, and they came from everywhere, from vents and access corridors and places no one had thought to guard, because the Drath did not use doors when smaller openings were available. They were the size of large dogs, quick and dark and almost silent, with sensory organs that could read chemical signatures through 3 meters of rock. They flowed onto the parade ground like water finding its level, and in less than 4 seconds they had taken positions between and around the Velcon and the Osser in a dispersal pattern that a military analyst would have taken 3 hours to compute. 100 of them. 200 war-class units on the parade ground. All 3 species. Arrayed in interlocking battle formations, each species compensating for the gaps in the other's coverage, the whole arrangement as coherent and deliberate as a sentence. Not one of them was restrained. Not one wore a control collar. Not one was sedated. They stood behind Mara Ellison and they were still. She turned to face the platform. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The statement was standing behind her in 3 species and 200 individual declarations that this human, this specific one, was the thing they had chosen to follow. High Chancellor Zareth looked at her for a long time. He looked at the formation behind her. He looked at the young delegate from the chorus of unending agreement, who was vibrating in all 3 of their harmonic registers simultaneously in a frequency that translated, very roughly, as O. He looked back at Mara. "How?" he said. And for the first time in perhaps 2 centuries, High Chancellor Zareth asked a question and genuinely did not know what the answer would be. Mara tilted her head slightly. The corner of her mouth moved in a direction that was not quite a smile but occupied the same neighborhood. "We listened to them," she said. "For 7 years, we listened before we asked them to listen to us." Another stillness fell over the platform. This one was different from all the deliberate pauses that Zareth had engineered over 6 centuries. It was the stillness of a room in which something has just become true that was not true before. Zareth straightened. He unfolded both sets of hands, the full open gesture, unambiguous across species lines, which meant, I am persuaded. The council, he said, will reconvene inside. I believe the vote on full alliance status will be brief. He turned from the railing. Behind him, 41 civilizations began talking at once. On the parade ground, Mara Ellison turned back to face the formation. She raised 2 fingers. The Velcon broke ranks smoothly, the Osser pivoted without command, the Drath flowed back toward their shadows. Her adjutant appeared at her elbow, clutching his datapad with both hands. He had the look of a man who had understood, intellectually, what was going to happen and had still not been entirely prepared for the reality of it. Commander, he said. Yes. That was, he stopped. Started again. The Chancellor said the vote would be brief. I know, she said. You knew he would say that. She picked up her jacket from the ground where she had set it before walking out, shook a small piece of grit from the collar, and put it back on. I knew, she said, that no one argues with 200 reasons standing in formation. She walked back toward the chamber doors. The parade ground behind her was empty again. The shadowless light fell across the pale stone and found nothing to catch on, just the faint impression of something vast and deliberate, still fading from the air.